The smell that wasn't there. A storm inside the brain. They say when you smell burnt toast out of nowhere, it means a stroke is coming. That's not quite true, but it does point to something deeper, something stranger, something most of us never question. What if your brain could lie to you, perfectly? What if it could make you smell something that wasn't there? Hear words no one said. Relive memories you never made. For some people, this isn't a horror story. It's life. And it begins with the quietest of storms. Not a seizure with convulsions. Not the kind you see in movies. No, this one starts with a scent, a feeling, a glitch in reality so subtle you almost miss it. And then, your world folds in. This is the strange, disorienting universe of temporal lobe epilepsy, where seizures don't just short-circuit the body, they hijack consciousness. And to understand how it all works, how a single spark can rewrite your sense of reality, we have to start with the part of the brain that defines who you are. The temporal lobes sit just above your ears, one on each side. They process sound, memory, language, emotion. They're also responsible for meaning, connecting patterns to concepts, decoding speech, recognizing faces. And deep inside the left temporal lobe is a little structure shaped like a seahorse, the hippocampus. It helps you form and retrieve memories. It's how you know what today feels like versus yesterday. Next to it sits the amygdala, your emotional alarm system. Fear, pleasure, dread, déjà vu, these come from here. Now imagine this part of your brain going haywire for 30 seconds, just 30 seconds. Your emotions, hijacked. Your sense of time, warped. Your body, frozen or acting on its own. This isn't fiction. It's called a focal seizure, and when it starts in the temporal lobe, it can be surreal. Because in temporal lobe epilepsy, the seizure often doesn't show on the outside. There's no flailing, no shouting, no collapse. What happens is internal, and it can feel like stepping out of your own life. It often starts with an aura. But this isn't the kind of aura you get before a migraine. This one can be sensory, emotional, spiritual. Some people smell burning, rotten eggs, cigarette smoke, freshly baked bread or toast. Others hear music, faint, looping melodies. Some get déjà vu so intense they swear they've lived the moment before, exactly, down to every breath. Others feel fear, but not normal fear. A terror so profound it doesn't feel like it's theirs. It's as if the universe is collapsing in on them. Some feel peace instead, a euphoria so deep it brings them to tears. In rare cases, people report visions, spiritual awakenings, out-of-body experiences, even a sense of talking to something bigger than themselves. What's happening? The brain is misfiring in the exact regions that control emotion, memory, and perception. It's not just that the brain is confused. It's that it makes you confused and completely convinced. The seizures themselves usually last less than 2 minutes, but the effects, they can linger. Some people come out disoriented, unable to speak. Some stare into space and can't remember why. Others repeat the same phrase over and over. A few keep functioning on autopilot, talking, walking, even driving without awareness. And here's where it gets even stranger. Temporal lobe epilepsy doesn't always show up on an EEG. The electrical storm is buried deep inside the brain, too deep to detect unless you know exactly where to look. Some people go years misdiagnosed. They're told they have panic attacks, or psychosis, or that it's all in their head. Well, it is all in their head, but not the way most people think. The causes, sometimes it's trauma, sometimes infection, sometimes genetics, sometimes no clear reason at all. For people with mesial temporal sclerosis, the inner structure of the temporal lobe begins to harden and scar over time, and that scarring, like a brittle wire, sets the stage for seizures. Others develop it after head injury or fever-induced seizures in childhood. In rare cases, it can be triggered by tumors or autoimmune responses. But no matter the origin, The result is the same. A small section of the brain begins to fire without control, and once that starts, the brain changes. Neural pathways reorganize. The seizure becomes a cycle. But here's where it gets even more fascinating and more human. Some people with temporal lobe epilepsy develop a cluster of traits so specific, doctors gave it a name, Geschwin syndrome. It's not a diagnosis, more like a personality shift seen in a subset of patients. Traits include hypergraphia, compulsive writing; hyperreligiosity, a deep, sometimes overwhelming sense of spiritual meaning; vivid emotional thinking; intensified emotional experiences; and a stickiness of thought, a tendency to linger on ideas and conversations long after they've passed. Some of history's most enigmatic thinkers may have had signs of this syndrome. Thinkers, artists, prophets. It's controversial, of course, but the idea lingers. Could the same misfire that causes seizures also unlock unique ways of experiencing the world? Could a glitch in the brain also be a doorway? Treatment is possible. Anti-epileptic medications work for many. For some, surgical removal of the seizure focus can be life-changing. There's even responsive neurostimulation, implanted devices that detect a seizure before it happens and send a corrective signal. But for those who live with it daily, temporal lobe epilepsy is more than a diagnosis. It's a condition that questions the very nature of perception. When you feel something powerful that no one else can see, when your senses betray you, but also open you, when your brain becomes a storm, where do you end and the seizure begin? Temporal lobe epilepsy asks questions science still doesn't fully understand. What is consciousness? What is memory? What is emotion when it can be flipped on or off like a switch? And perhaps the strangest question of all, if reality is constructed by the brain, what happens when that construction glitches? For most of us, reality feels fixed, stable, trustworthy. But for those living with these seizures, reality can warp, and yet they continue. They parent, they work, they live through each episode, knowing it might happen again. That reality may fracture just for a moment, but they come back. And that return, that resilience is what makes them remarkable. So the next time you smell something that isn't there, feel a wave of déjà vu that leaves you dizzy, or catch a flicker of memory that wasn't quite real. Remember, your brain is powerful, but not always honest. And for some, a single spark can become a storm, because sometimes the smell of toast isn't breakfast. It's a signal, a whisper, a spark in the dark, a storm in your brain.